All right, here we go. Welcome back. We're talking about insights from inside what it's like to operate a co-living property and what is that business. You know my man Franco. He's my mentor.
Yes.
He's my friend. He's the guy that I lean into. So hell, if I'm going to lean into him, I want to share those dimes of wisdom with everybody else. And this is one of the things that just jumped out is that Franco and I just had an amazing conversation, and I want to make sure that everybody kind of hears the learning, because the beauty of our community is that we actually talk to each other and we learn from each other. And this was super insightful because the problem, let's quote the problem. I want to reject everybody who doesn't qualify. And in our co-living world and leveraging PadSplit, we kind of lose sight of, wait a minute, what is our core business, right? It's to provide affordable housing, but we want to de-risk it as best we can. But if we move the lever too far, then we're actually hurting our own business. So, Frank, I'm just going to give you the stage. And if you want to just kind of recite that story that you were telling me about what you and the property managers have kind of learned in terms of like high rejection rates, I would love that. I think all of our people that are watching this would appreciate it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think
Hold on. How many doors do you manage?
Yeah, so we manage 600, around close to 600 doors. Yeah, 600 doors now. And so when
my baby's all grown up.
yeah. So we tried it on quite a large scale to kind of see, like, the whole idea started with using a lot of the old real estate investment ideas, right? Like, so I mean, our business co-housing is not really new. It's just, but it's kind of being reinvented again, right? Like, it's trying to, like, it's like adapting what was happening before to like now, because of the demand and the need that people need for affordable housing right now. And so one of those old ideas was like, okay, qualification wise, like so much times rent. Like, okay, you make 3 times rent, or like they make, they have to have a certain credit score, or like, just like all these old different ideas, right? Like, okay, these type of criminal, right? Like, just all these different type of ideas. And so we looked at trying to adapt those things with our portfolio, because what happened was we were more weren't as strict with across the portfolio before. And then we thought about what happens, like, what would be the effect if we try to apply some of these things to our portfolio, right? To the properties, to the rooms.
In essence,
right?
You're saying, like, okay, how do we
get with the 10
more stringent?
Yes, more stringent, right? Because the idea is like, okay, will we get a better type of tenant, right? Will we have a different, like, just kind of, the business is always changing. So you always just kind of want to test a few things, adapt a few things, see kind of how we could become better, right? And this one that way is like, okay, like, will we have better tenants with less problems? Because that's the idea, right? Like, okay, let's apply this funnel, right? And then at the end of the funnel comes out all these great, amazing tenants, right? Like, they make a lot of money and they're going to be perfect for the house, right? And, you're not going to have any issues, right? Like, that's the idea, right? Because it works in long-term rental. Why wouldn't it work with co-housing? So we tried it. We tried it for about a month or so, like a little bit over a month, and found out it didn't work. Like, it doesn't work for us. Maybe it works for other people, but across all the rooms that we tried in all the different markets, good areas, not, gentrifying areas, up and coming areas, like, we tried it in all across the portfolio. And at the end of the day, we decided, like, it doesn't really fit with what we do in terms of affordable housing. And a lot of it has to do with understanding who our client is. Now, what was the experience? So, and we started with, the most stringent guidelines that was somewhat reasonable, right? Like, we tried to kind of like, okay, what happens if we did 2 times earnings to the rent rate, right? So let's say, for example, if the rent was, let's say, 800 a month or something like that, okay, they need to bring in at least 1,600 a month or something like that. So, like, okay, that, and then, verification, like, what information do we want to get from them? Like, okay, we wanted to check their IDs, we wanted to see W-2s, and, like, tax returns. And we weren't even as strict on the credit. Like, we understood, like, okay, maybe a lot of these potential tenants wouldn't have good credit. We were okay with that, right? It was just more like on the income and then like the verification side of it. And what ended up happening was we got a lot of potential requests like to rent, but we didn't get a lot of people to make it through the funnel, right? As like reasonable as it sounds, we were getting almost everybody not approved by that. Like almost nobody qualified.
Your own personal secondary screening stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
almost nobody qualified. And then so
got it.
we loosened it up a little bit. And we went to 1.5 times, right? So if they're making 800, okay, if they're making like around 1,200 or something like that, which you would think like, okay, if you know, like if you're making, um, if your rent is 800 a month or 700 a month, like you would think, okay, you need to be at least 1,200 to survive, right? Um, and even with that, we did not get a really good response. In fact, almost 90%, it was like around 92%, did it. And it wasn't just the income, but they decided like they didn't want to go through with it. Maybe they had other intentions or whatever. So like it was just screening a lot of people out. Like we only had like an 8% or 10% approval rate of the people that made it in. And the ones that made it in, of that 10%, when they got into the properties, they realized that co-housing really wasn't what they were looking for. Right? Like, no, that's not what I had in mind. Because a lot of these people, they never did it before, or they might have done it when they were younger, when they were like in college or something like that. So like, now they're in a point where they might need to do it again, and it just didn't work out. Like it's just they go in and realize like, no, this is not for me, right? Because not co-housing is not for everybody, right? You have to kind of like be okay working and be in interacting with other people. Like you have to kind of fit what you're looking for. And if it's not a good fit, then they might look for another option. And so we realized like, okay, we kind of took a step back and see like, okay, who is actually our client? Like who are the members and the tenants that are coming in to a co-housing property? And it's really those people that are just really need affordable housing because they're just trying to get by.
Yeah.
Right? Like they're in the position where like, hey, you know what, they're just barely making it, and this is their option, right? Those are our clients. It's not the guy or lady who's like an engineer who makes like all this money that like, yeah, I have this great idea. I'm gonna live in a co-housing property. Like I don't really see yes, there are people that do that. Okay. I'm not gonna say like we don't have any professionals or any high income people in our property. Of course we do, but we don't have many, right? Like that's more like the more who our clients are mostly are the people who live in your normal places, restaurants, retail stores, that work in warehouses, that their hours are not consistent, right? It fluctuate. Like those are people that need affordable housing, right? And they
Workforce
need
housing,
host.
right?
Yeah, workforce housing, exactly, right? And and it's not also just workforce, but it's also like students. Like we have some that are like, oh, their parents will pay, right? Which we're okay with, like as long as it kind of lines up, and then we verify that, like that's going to be the case, and things like that. Because we do have some that are students, and the parents help them out, and, that makes sense, and we'll work with them on those type of situations. But like it just there's many different situations that people will find themselves in. Like maybe they're starting a business, and the business is just kind of up and coming, because we have a lot that are self-employed. They make money on the internet or something, and like, but it's not completely stable yet, right? And they're still kind of building up their income stream. This is kind of what they could afford right now, right? They can't afford to get a whole apartment or a studio or something like that, right? And so that's who our client is. And and we just like, we realized that, and we made adjustments now to that, right? It was a good experiment to really see kind of would this work, right? Like those common old adage real estate investing rules of thumb, like do those apply to co-housing?
Right.
I mean, yes and no, right? Like it doesn't really with you use traditional. Maybe if you modify it a little bit or something, like you're gonna have to just kind of understanding who our client is. And so that was a really eye-opening test that we did. And we made an adjustment, because obviously the business would not be able to sustain with like not like you're gonna have incredible vacancy, like you're just trying to find this needle in the haystack tenants that are out there to be perfect, and that would just absolutely destroy your business in terms of vacancy, right? Because you're just waiting for this one perfect person to come in, and they're very few. And if you're trying to build a portfolio or do this on scale, it's not going to work. And it kind of leads me to think too, why some of those other startups that did co-housing that targeted the higher end, like the super high end, like in San Francisco, it's like, why
we live
really
guys,
work,
right?
Right. Like it didn't really work. Right. In concept, I think it works. And I think it's just because I feel like, and this is just my thoughts, right? I don't have data on this part of it, but it just kind of, doing this for a while now and just kind of getting a better understanding of the business. I feel like what we're not there. Maybe there will come a time where we'll have these other segments. I think it will come, right? I just feel we're not there yet. Like it almost reminds me of kind of like Webvan, right? Like if you think of Webvan or like Pink Dot, like like so these are old, like, and people are like thinking, dating me
we're old,
like
Franco,
early
we're old.
.com times, right? So, but it's a great like lead to what I'm trying to get at, right? Where nowadays delivery is just a common thing, right? We have Amazon delivering, groceries delivering, Target delivers, Walmart delivers, right? We're back 25 years ago. They had these companies that did delivery, like Pink Dot and, like all these pets.com, like these huge companies that were trying to lead the charge, but it was just too early.
Yeah.
It just that what they were trying to do with the market, we weren't ready for yet. Right. And now we're now in a position where now the market is ready and these things are now multi-billion-dollar companies. Right. So I feel like that part of co-housing will happen one day as this now becomes more normalized. Like, hey, people now know this is an option. Like that day will come. I just don't think we're there yet. Our client base right now, the people who really need our service right now, are people that are just, they're workforce housing, like they're just getting by. They don't make a lot of money and they're just looking for some place where they could live. Otherwise, they might be out in the street or stuck with family or, or something like that, right? Like that's the need that we're trying to fill at this moment.
Okay.
And so
that makes total sense.
Yeah.
But you come and speak from it from a position of callous and having calluses. You're not a callous person, but you've been doing this long enough.
Yeah.
Where very little surprises you. I love our conversation because I'll say something. It's like I'm today old when I experience this. I'm like, Franco, what the hell just happened? And you're like, oh man, that happens all the time.
Yeah.
So as a new host, when I hear that, I'm like, oh God, how can I control? How can I put some parameters around it where I hear what you're saying? I don't want to let everybody in because not everybody's a good fit. So what are best practices that you guys have learned from this experiment to backing up to where you're comfortable now?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of we're pretty open in terms of working with certain people and giving people chances. Because so people need a place to live and they don't really want to mess that up. So most people have a good intention. Now, life happens, right? Like things happen, they get things that are outside of their control, right? And I know you have those hosts, and this is just like our strategy has been working well for us. So this is the way we operate. I mean, I know you have those old school hosts that are like, no, they're like late on this. And it's like, no, we're not, like no extension. I'm going to file an eviction right away, immediately. And like, I'm not going to like give them an inch.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you could do that. Like if you want to run your business that way, or you're going to kind of like operate in that type of situation, then yeah, of course you could do that. But that, it's a people business, right? Like it's right. Like you have to be able to kind of like have like some conversation. And yes, okay, you're gonna have some people that might try to take advantage of you or this, but you can't think that everyone's gonna take advantage of you because most don't, right? Like most are really like in that situation. But that's one of the secrets why we have a longer retention. Like we have people that stay with, like on average right now across, all the properties and all the rooms, our average tenure is 380 days.
That's wild.
Right. And so, but it's just understanding, being able to work with the people that that I really have good intentions, are really trying. And and we've had people like, oh, they run a tough time and they finally got a job after a couple of weeks, and they make small payments, or we try to work out a situation. Like just kind of working with them now. So having said that, because of that and our experience, we have kind of maybe a wider funnel than other people, right? Like, other people may not want to be able to do that. So, but even with that, what we found was, as long as they're not like trying to do fraud, like they're trying to like use someone else's identity and trying to like do something that's really like, no, like we're definitely, for the most part, it's been okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just, they have a source of income. Like, here's what we look for. You have a source of income, like they needed some source to pay it, right? So if they're completely unemployed now at the moment, then obviously we can't house them, because how are we going to get paid, right? So they need to have some way to pay us, like that. We feel like, okay, some source of income.
That's verified. Yep.
And then they just got to verify that they're actually a real person and not some stolen identity or something like that.
Right.
And that's it. And then, having conversations with them or trying to figure out, making sure they understand what what entails co-housing, right? Like what's involved with it, like, what the expectations of them are. Because it is different than them living on their own, right? Because they're living with other people. And some people are not used to that or don't know what that is. And so kind of just getting a feel for that, making sure they're comfortable with that type of environment. And if they're okay with that, of course you have the other normal screenings, like, criminal checks and stuff like that. And, background checks, stuff like that. And so as long as you pass that, that's okay, and that's it. Like, we kind of went back to and that's how we were doing before, and it worked good, but we just kind of wanted to test something out different and see. So we just basically went back to what we used to do before. I felt like, this is the best way, like this is what works,
Right.
at least for us, and kind of what we do, and how we manage the properties.
Yeah. And like, we talk a lot about, do you have SOPs? Like if you're going to run a portfolio of these, you have to have some standards. You have to have some, processes that you follow, because you can't scale unless you have some systems in place. Yeah. So if you're understanding the economic component of the rejection and the analysis of the person that's applying, what else do you put stress on?
Like in terms of the screening process, or like in the business?
What makes you more comfortable? All right, fine. You make 1.5 or 2 times income. I'm okay with that. What's the next strata that you put emphasis on?
A lot of it is just like with the member, like not like not much actually, to be honest. Like, I mean, as long as they understand like what's involved, right? So like, okay, we like some members have handle guests a little bit differently, like depending on the host. Because like if it's my properties, I'm pretty open. Like I'm not, but there are hosts that are not as open. Like they don't want any guests, and they're like super, you know what I mean? And so, so with me, I'm kind of open. Like we just want to know kind of like if they have a guest once in a while, they can't have overnight guests. Okay, so we don't allow them to the guests to stay overnight. But if they have somebody that comes and visits and stuff like that, hangs out for a couple hours just to, like say, sometimes it's a family member, like the parent wanting to come in and tell me, like some hosts are like super strict. They won't let anybody visit the house. Right. But we're kind of more open. So we just want to ask like, okay, if you have a guest, like we want to know who that person is. So like, you're going to have to give us like, their ID, and we verify who that person is. And, just in case if there's ever an issue, we know who's there. Right. So we handle it a little bit differently. But in terms of screening guests, like we just want to, as long as they understand kind of like what the situation is and what they're getting them, like how the co-housing environment is, we're pretty open. We're not that stringent about who we accept into the house. Because then our approach is that if it doesn't work out, like if it's just like it's not the right house for them or not the right environment for them, we just let them know it's like, hey, it's not for you. Like we recommend that you find another property, another house, or like, find another type of accommodation.
Yeah.
Because it's just not a good fit, and you may occasionally have a problem with that.
Yeah.
But most of the time we don't. Like if it's just not a good fit, they'll just leave, and I think some of the hosts are scared, right? They're worried like, okay, because you see in the news, like all these horror stories. Right? Like, oh, like this person moved in and now I have to evict them and they're not going to come out, but this is like, you have to keep in mind the news likes to sensationalize things So then that way you watch and read their articles, and they could make money off their advertisement. Like that's their objective, right?
Right.
So they kind of take things to the extreme. Now the reality of it, I mean, I am in a fortunate position because I could see it across hundreds of rooms, and I realized that that is not a common occurrence. Like that's not like every single time that happens, like this is what happens. It's not the case, right? It's like, once in a while you may have a problem, but like it's not super common, right? And if I'm a host that has like one house or two house, like the odds of you running into that all the time is very low, unless you're not operating the property correctly.
Right.
Right.
And I
So,
think
but a lot of it runs down to, I mean, there's a lot of different things. It comes to the host, how you operate your property, how involved you are, like all those type of things, right? And so, because that's what could cause problems. Like a lot of the ones I've seen that have problems is because the hosts are not running the business the right way.
they're
That's
not
typically
engaged. I
yeah,
think
they're not
that's
engaged, and like, and
yeah.
you don't always have to be engaged, but you need to kind of have somebody that is, right? So
Exactly.
you need to have a
Exactly.
property manager that's engaged or kind of is in tune with what's happening in the property.
Yeah.
You know, yeah,
I agree 100%. And I think that's like we did a surveys, and one of the things that we realized between member experiences, good and bad, especially as it relates to tenure, it doesn't have to be Franco the owner. It doesn't have to be Quentin the owner. Somebody on your team has to talk to the human being.
yeah,
And I think once they realize, that somebody cares enough to talk to that person and make sure they're having a relatively good experience, that takes you 90% of the way there.
yeah,
To your point, like you talk to somebody and let them know what the expectations are. Do you know that you're going to live with 6 other people?
yeah,
Yes. Do you know that you're going to share a bathroom with 3 other people or 2 other people? Yes. That eliminates so much of the problems we have when it comes to how the members experience co-living for the first time, because 2/3 of every booking is a brand new person that's never done co-living.
yeah. I can see that. Mhm.
Right. And it's like somebody's staying because we've got a really high occupancy rate. So it
Yeah,
becomes a product that they are dealing and using and utilizing. The question is for the business owner, like you, myself, and every other host that's out there, how do we make it easier for them to stay longer? But the problem for us is like we have hosts that are rejecting everybody, thinking that, this is the JW Marriott. But we're not the JW Marriott. Let's be
yeah,
realistic about where we are in the scale of hospitality. You can provide a great experience, and we talk about fast food. Chick-fil-A
yeah.
offers an amazing experience.
Actually, I have a great story
Yeah.
in terms of perception. I think a really great one, because even like even with me, with all my experience, I still felt like, I felt comfortable like in this situation, yeah, but um, it just it's pretty eye opening, right? So we had a property that used to be an Airbnb. So one of our clients that we run on, they used to be an Airbnb, and it's a very nice property, as you'd imagine, right? A very beautiful property. Okay, and so we wanted to make sure that we got the right, because it's a nicer property, it has a lot more amenities, so we wanted to make sure that we had the right group of members in the property that could take care of it, and make sure we don't have any issues as much as possible. And so our first booking that we got, that we approved, that we looked at, so this person had like, I think it was like 20 counts of fraud. Okay, so 20 counts of fraud. Okay, so he applied. He had 20 counts of fraud. Now, any other host would immediately deny the booking. Okay, like any other host would immediately deny the booking. But we look past, like, because it's like, so, and this is gonna sound kind of weird, but like we understand people make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And so um he was on parole, like his parole officer came to visit the property, because then the parole officer needs to know wherever they live, like, so they always have to recheck in, they have to report, right? Because they're checking in on them. And we talked with the parole officer, we talked with him, um and he's actually a really okay person, you know what I mean? Like, yes, he made mistakes, yes, he's done things in life, but he did pay his due to society, right? Like, he went through his process, he paid his due, and he's trying to turn his life around. And we felt like, he had a job. I can't remember now exactly what he was doing, like where he was making his source of income. And we felt like, what, he seemed okay. Like he seemed genuinely like, hey, I'm trying to turn things around. I'm going through this process. We talked with the parole officer, and we figured like, hey, if we have a problem with this guy, we could always just call the parole officer, right? Like, and that guy will set him straight, right? Like you go straight back to jail or anything. So we felt like, okay. And then we talked to the host. Even our host, our client even went out and talked with him in person, which I wasn't expecting, right? Like, and then she straight out told me like, you know what, he's okay. You could approve him, like, let's approve him. And he's been living there ever since. We have never had any problem with him at all, like no problems at all.
Right.
Now, okay, I won't say like, okay, yeah, just like everyone is in a similar situation is gonna be, you prove every single person that's like that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that any other person would just automatically not even give it a time of day, like not even think through it and just automatically deny.
Yeah.
Right. That is not the type of housing we provide. You know what I mean? Like you have to, this is not short-term rental. Okay. We're not providing a hotel and dealing with the top of the top, like, people that make billions of dollars. Yeah. The 1%. Like that's not who we're working with. Right. Like we genuinely trying to provide affordable housing for people that need it because they don't have many options. Let's just be real.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so like, if you want to do this bit, stop just looking at the freaking money.
Thank you.
Excuse me. But like,
Thank
stop
you.
just looking at the money.
Yeah.
Like, yes, it's profitable. Yes, it's a great business if you do it right. Yes, yes, yes. But let's just not hallucinate about what we're really doing, right? We're really trying to like meet a demand that really needs our help. And so like that was very eye-opening, right? Because he's a great person and like, like he does it, he's trying to turn his life around and he's been great host. Like we have no problems in this house, and at first I was hesitant because it was a really nice house. I was hesitant to take it on because I'm like, I didn't want it to get damaged or anything for our client. And but our client was really like, no, let's try it, let's do it, right? And it's, we have only like 4 or 5 rooms there, and it's been working great. Like if we have had no problem, I thought it was going to be a big problem, and we haven't had any problems.
Yeah,
Really
so
that
good.
house. And so like I thought that was a great story to share because like, you don't just, try not to make rush judgments. Like, let's dig deeper a little bit in the story and see. And, by doing it that way and finding the right, creating the right atmosphere within your house, like that's how you're going to increase your tenure. That's how you're going to be successful in this business, and I think like if you try to do anything different, that like you go too far off from what we're really trying to do, not understanding what we're trying to do, then I think you're going to struggle. That's just kind of my opinion.
Gosh, I can't agree more. Like there's a crossroads between the mission and the math.
Yeah.
And like if you could completely lose sight of it and then we're trying to just run it as a super, Clorox bleached version of what we're doing. And we lose sight of the fact that the niches, it's the niche that we're in. We provide affordable housing for people who need it.
Yeah.
If you can provide a value to that person, they'll stay. And that's where you make your revenue is provide a good enough experience where that person gets value for what they pay and vice versa. You know? And to your point, like I've seen amazingly horror stories at $1 million Airbnbs.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like we're immune to bad actors because bad actors exist up and down the scale.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've had a lot of businesses in my life, right? I've done many different businesses and no business is just a straight up move, right? Like there's always things that's happening. I don't care what business you have. Like you could have a retail store, a restaurant, like you're going to have situations that happen that are unexpected. Like, things are always changing or, things are always happening, like stuff that you wouldn't expect. And not everything just goes straight up and perfect in life, right? Like, so, I mean, I think some investors or hosts just don't have realistic expectations of actually what they're doing or understand like business. Like, there's a lot of hype around like online and YouTube about like, oh, do this and like you could be 100% passive. And
Yeah.
I mean, let's be real. I've never found any like if you're gonna run a business the right way, I've never found a business to be 100% passive.
Right.
Never in my entire life. Like I don't care. Like my last business, I had 750 employees. Like I had regional managers and district managers and like 7 different departments, and I still wasn't passive.
Yeah.
You would think you had a board of directors and you had like C-level executives to be passive. No, you're still active. You know, maybe not as active into the business, but you're still active. Like you're still
Right.
involved. Like don't kid yourself that you're gonna do something that's like completely passive. I've never seen it in my entire life.
No, I agree. And like we break it up into really simple statements. In our world, the juice is worth the squeeze.
Yeah,
it is. And
Yeah.
but you ultimately, before you get into it, you have to ask yourself, you know, is the juice worth the squeeze? And you have to understand the business that we're getting into. It's a people
Yeah.
business.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's success here. And like that's the beauty of it, is like the examples of when a host is frustrated and sells their business and they sell their house to a different operator, and the operator comes back in and takes a 40% occupancy rate with 2 evictions and turns it into a 100% occupancy rate, generating $6,000, $7,000. It wasn't the house. It wasn't the business. It was how that business was operated. And I think that's what we're trying to get to.
Yeah. And well, in fact, I have several properties that I acquired that were previous owned by other hosts that they don't want, like they thought it was like a, you know, whatever, the bad vibe house, or like the area was horrible or whatever. Like I have several of those myself in my home portfolio that are doing amazing right now. Right? It's not the area, it's not the house, it's how you run it and the people that you put in it. That's it. It's as simple as that. You know what I mean? Because the demand is there. Like people need affordable housing all over the country.
Yeah.
And you know, so it's not that. It's just the way they were operating or the way they ran it. It's like, you know, the people that had in there just, you know, like they just, you know, each operator runs their business differently. And, you know, you kind of have to find that balance. And, you know, some people it's a good fit and some is not, right? Like it's just, you know, it's just like any business, right? Like some people like that type of business, some people like doing it this way. It's like, you know, you have to kind of find your own vibe and see kind of what works. And even myself, we're always changing kind of how we do things, always adapting and trying things out, and seeing kind of how we could become better.
Oh, that's my favorite lesson I've ever learned from you. Test.
Yeah.
Because you know what the cardinal rule of testing is? Nobody to get worse.
Yeah.
You're open to test for improvement. You take your lessons, apply them, and then all of a sudden you're lifting the floor. You know, my friend said something yesterday. We were talking about like sports, and he was like, "Oh, that player has a high floor, maybe a limited ceiling." I was like, "You can franchise around those guys."
Yeah.
You know, I think that's where we look at it is like, does your property have a high floor? Maybe it's a limited ceiling because you only have 4, 5, 6 bedrooms.
Yeah.
But, you know, you work within the structure that you work in. And we have so many hosts. They're thriving in our marketplace because they've kind of learned and evolved with our business. So I love that story. I thank you so much for touching on that, because it's something that hosts are talking about all the time. Oh, I'm going to reject everybody. You have 0 people in your house.
I know.
That's not the business that we're in, you know?
No.
So like you understand where your comfort zone is, and it doesn't have to be the same for everybody. Right. But you find a system that allows for you to understand, you know, approvals around this parameter work, you know, and then you lean into the fact that you look around left to the right and everybody else is at 88, 90% occupancy, generating the revenue they predicted. What are you doing wrong, and what can you adopt into your approval process that allows that to happen?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and vacancy is like one of those silent killers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, you know, you're waiting for this perfect person to come, but then if there are not that many of them, right? Like, or you know, like they come, it takes so long, that vacancy is going to kill you. You're never going to get above a certain number.
Right.
And so, you know, occupancy wise, so it's just kind of finding that balance, right? Like knowing who your market is and finding the balance that works between business wise and like and everything else. So
amen to the Targets and the Walmarts of the world.
Yeah, definitely. You know? I mean, like, just even within that, right? Like you you have Target, Walmart, you have Nordstrom, Bloomingdale's, and then you have Dollar Tree. And you used to have 99-cent store, but they're not around anymore. But you have Dollar Tree, Family Dollar, right? You have
the 97-cent store.
97-cent store. So, but
yeah,
you know, they all
realistic.
cater to a different client, right? Like they just all cater to a different client, and they all work, you know.
Yep. You're the best, Franco. Thank you for sharing wisdom. I'll talk to you later, buddy.
Thanks. Bye-bye.